I'll just keep accepting people, but let's go ahead and get started. So thank you guys for joining us, or thank you all for joining us today. This is kind of a follow-up presentation to our March presentation, and that kind of went into the immigration system as a whole and its background, and today will be more of an update on what's happened since March and basically since COVID really started affecting the US. And so we have two of our staff attorneys here today, Phil Davies and Mauricio Pena, and they're going to be going over a few major topics that we've seen in the news and that you've most likely heard about. And that's including the changes to DACA, and that has been quite a few back and forth. Additionally, what's been going on in immigration detention, especially related to COVID and how that's exacerbated conditions. Also, they will be discussing what asylum proceedings look like and how MPP has changed, which is the Remain in Mexico policy. And there will be plenty of time for questions throughout the presentation and at the end as well. So if you have a question, please type it in the chat box below. I'm going to make a post. And somebody did ask, are you allowed to record? Just so you know, we are recording this, and it will be posted on our website sometime next week. So you'll also have access to the recording as well once this webinar is over. So if you're able to record, feel free, but we'll also be posting it on our website as well. So yeah, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. It just says chat. There's a little message bubble, and I'll be checking those questions throughout the presentation. We do ask that you stay on mute just because it makes it easier for when we're presenting. So just please direct all your questions to the chat box. And then, yeah, I think let's go ahead and get started. We have a good agenda, and again, thank you all for joining us. So I'll pass it along.
Thank you. Yes, as Spencer mentioned, my name is Mauricio Pena. I'm a supervising attorney in the San Antonio main office. I mainly do detained work. So I'm specialized on court proceedings, court hearings, detention work. And just a quick update, since March, in March when we had the last webinar, COVID was just kind of starting, and we had started to see a few changes in the implementation of rules, visitation changes, court changes. But it really lately, especially since the summer, it's, as everybody knows, and I'm sure is aware, that COVID has really taken off in the United States, and the numbers are increasing every day. Detentions have increasingly and consistently shown cases of infection of people that have been detained in. I specifically work in the South Texas Detention Center here in Texas. It's in Pearsall, Texas, so about an hour and a half, almost a little under an hour and a half from San Antonio down south towards Laredo, towards the border. So most of my experience is coming from there. However, this is what we're seeing in Pearsall, what we're seeing in this detention center in regards to COVID. It's being reported nationally, something that has been occurring and something that has been reported and documented throughout a lot of, or most of, the detention facilities for immigration purposes. ICE has implemented certain rules, or at least attempted to stem the tide of COVID. For example, now the detainees, all of our clients that are in there, are supposed to be able to socially isolate. They're not allowed to roam the halls in between shift changes. Public places such as the library and part of the outside access to that has become very, very limited to that. Most of the people that are still detained are mostly isolated in the sense that once they believe someone has contracted COVID, they usually put into isolation first for a few days or a few weeks while everything is being tested. So it's very hard on a population that is already downtrodden and detained and is in a horrible situation. And with COVID, it's making it even worse. The anxiety is through the roof. I get a lot of phone calls from my clients. They're just desperate because they want to move on with their cases. And we've had a lot of issues also just getting in front of a judge, even if they're detained. Um, the government has tried to implement a virtual system where everybody appears remotely, either through the phone or through some sort of video application through the court. That's been very difficult to actually implement. There's a lot of issues throughout the hearings. You know, personally for me, when I've had hearings, it's most of the time I can't even see my client. I can't speak directly to my client without having to announce whatever it is that my client wants to tell to me to the whole court, because he can only speak to me through the video or through the phone that everybody's connected. So privacy as attorney and client just goes out the window, because there's no way for me to actually interact with the client in person once we're starting to do that. We're trying as much as possible. I still attempt to go to the hearings in person to see my client, but with the whole restrictions on COVID and the numbers is still climbing up, it's increasingly becoming more difficult and more dangerous for everybody to be going to the detention facility in and out, in and out. It's been very difficult. Um, at the very beginning when this was happening, so we're talking about March, April, May or so, we did see um, some people, an increase of releases through ICE. These were people that had some very serious underlying health conditions, but even then, it wasn't really that many people that we were seeing. What we actually saw, uh, I'd laugh because I just cannot understand the logic behind this. But what we saw were a lot of transfers. So they were transferring people from detention facilities to a different detention facility. So what we saw, especially from Pearsall and the women, the detainees in Pearsall, were they were being sent down to Laredo, which hadn't recorded any cases yet, but Pearsall had positive cases. But instead of trying to work with us, with the community, or taking a look at the cases of each client and detainee and releasing them for health concerns, they transfer them to another detention center. And now the detention centers all over the country and all over the world, all over the Texas, have positive cases. At the beginning, that's what they did. We did, like as I mentioned, we did see a few people that were released, people with some very serious underlying health conditions. However, even still, it was a struggle to get through to the officers, because I'm not sure if it was because of the pandemic or they were understaffed or the way that they just managed the cases. But especially for Pearsall, the officers had a schedule of maybe 2 or 3 days in the office in Pearsall and then 2 or 3 days at a different detention facility, and they had hundreds of cases, so they will take weeks and sometimes months to respond to anything that we submit to them, any request for them to come out, any request for paroles, any request just to even speak to a deportation officer is basically impossible at this point. So that has been an extreme challenge for that. We've had some definite issues with that. Just speaking with my clients, they do not feel adequately protected, especially because they at the very beginning, especially. So the first few months, like we're even talking about, I think they're even talking about June. The threat wasn't taken very seriously in there for the people that were detained in there. So what I mean by that was they didn't implement any sort of regular routine deep cleaning for the facilities, the living facilities, the dorms, the communal areas, the eating, the showers. The way that the cleaning is done, especially in this detention facility, and this happens mostly through GEO, but the group, the private prison group GEO, but it happens through other detention facilities as well, is that the detainees themselves are the ones that clean and are in charge of the hygiene of the living areas, the quarters, the food, as well as the bathroom facilities for hygiene. And from speaking from a lot of my clients from different dorms, they told me the same thing. none of them were instructed on how to actually clean. They have a closet with cleaning supplies that they can, if they want to, they can use, or if not, they don't have to. They're not provided with the proper gear to do that. I'm not sure if you guys may have seen this, but this happened in California from a geodetention center as well. The cleaning chemical that we're using was very corrosive, and the detainees that were actually cleaning were actually bleeding from their hands and their noses from being exposed to this cleaning chemical without the proper gear or instruction on how to properly use that. So this is something that we've absolutely seen here in Pure Soul. We've seen that a lot of people are not, well, the people that are actually doing the hygiene, the cleaning, and the sanitation are not actually trained and provided with the right equipment to actually provide a safe environment. Social distancing in detention is non-existent. The dorms are there, the communal areas, everybody's in a close quarters. A lot of the dorms are few beds, bunks in together. So there's people that are going to be in close proximity every day at all time. What we have seen that that's affected is this access to counsel. Absolutely, access to counsel has been impacted. Our visitations have become very, very difficult to do in person. I know Phil can speak to this too as well. But when we're there in person, the way that they have set up the limitations now is you can only see a client from a dorm at a time. So there's one or two attorneys and you have a few different clients, you're potentially looking at about hours upon hours of waiting. I think right now, my longest time that I've had to wait to actually go in to see a client was 8 hours. So I had to spend 8 hours in the lobby just waiting to go see my client because there were 3 attorneys before me that had a quite substantial number of clients that they needed to see as well because of this the new policy of one dorm at a time has really limited that. The other issues that we're having is access through phone is very difficult to get through to our clients and phones. They were supposed to allow us to have free minutes for our clients to call for representation. It was a federal thing. It went through. Everybody had to do that. Everybody had to be access to those free minutes, but we still be seeing that rollout be very slow and very inconsistent. I know for Pure Soul it's on Wednesdays and they get about 10 minutes and then the call just automatically cuts. So that's been very frustrating. Our clients that are in there is just it's just a bad situation all around in the sense that they're not properly taken care of. The sanitation is lacking, seriously lacking. There's been infection among staff, even from the guards in there, because as Phil can see, and a lot of all the attorneys that have been there, they don't really take that many precautions. Yeah, the front lobby officers that we've seen are wearing the masks and the gloves, but when we see the swath of officers coming in and out, nobody wearing masks, nobody wearing gloves, everybody using the same keypad coming in and out, no social distancing, and they're having positive cases with the guards there. And I had many clients complain about how the guards don't use the proper equipment. They don't use the mask. Some of them use a mask, some of them don't if they don't want to. Some wear gloves, but most don't use gloves when they're interacting with everybody. So this is an ongoing thing that's been happening. Pure Soul specifically, this detention facility does provide them with the PPE, the personal protection equipment. However, it's very limited. Last I heard, when I spoke to my clients, which was about maybe 3 weeks ago, they were getting about, I believe, either 1 or 2 face masks a week. And they had to use that and recycle that throughout the week. So while a lot of the people have started doing is decided to hoard it. So they use this for a little bit and they keep it there and throw it away. And then the next week they get another one, just to kind of feel protected. But in the hindsight, if they got infected with the mask and they're bringing back the mask to their own items and personal items and everything. So it's just kind of a cycle that's perpetuating poor hygiene and poor protection there. I've had clients also complain about the amount of time it takes to actually get to see a doctor or request any medical help. You have to go through, I believe it's once a week, they come in to see if anybody, to check to see if everybody has any symptoms or if anybody is requesting to see the doctors. Then you have to fill out a paperwork and then you send that out. And then sometimes it's very unreliable because sometimes it could be an hour, 2 hours, sometimes it could be 3 days, 4 days, 5 days until you actually get called up to the infirmary if you have any symptoms that you're showing. So now this is with COVID. Now with the symptoms, they're a lot quicker. So if you're showing signs of COVID or symptoms related to COVID, they are faster. But usually what they do is they put in quarantine. They lock down the dorm while they investigate. They take the temperature and they hopefully separate the person that may be infected. The issue here is that instead of being sent to like a hospital or being taken care of in a room, like they're sent to a solitary confinement. So they just throw them in the pozo as they call them there, like just while they wait for everything. So that's also very alarming and very distressing for from anybody there. It discourages people for reporting or self-reporting because they're afraid they don't want to be sent in isolation for who knows how long. The issue with quarantine that we have, as I mentioned before, is that a lot of cases have been delayed because once a dorm goes in quarantine, from my experience, it's very, very unlikely that the judge is going to go forward with the case, even if I'm present. So if it's, for example, a bond hearing and we're fighting for bond from a client or we have a good case and we want to get him out as soon as possible. So I, as his attorney, am able to waive his presence before the judge, so me and the judge can get him out. However, since this isn't going on, judges are refusing that. So they want to make sure everybody's there, which it makes sense. In a sense, they're trying to protect due process. But in this case, it's also hurting a lot of the clients because now they're potentially weeks, could be potential months, that their cases are just in limbo. They're just kind of hanging out there. So that's been very difficult. The border has been seen especially hit. I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware, and if you follow the news, and I have seen that infection rates along northern Mexico and the southern states, it's increasing and it's getting bad. This has created the policy of CBP basically stopping everybody or anybody trying to come into the United States, or if they make it in, trying to get them, throw them back to Mexico or Central America as quickly as possible. So we have seen cases, asylum denials and cases and deportations that happen in weeks, sometimes days, and that is something that is just incredible. It's incredibly devastating to see because asylum process is somewhat of a lengthy process because it has a lot of checks and balances to make sure that everybody is doing what they're supposed to and to make sure to protect the rights and to protect the law as well. But what we have seen lately because of COVID and everything is that everything has moved so quickly and the government has been moving with a very incentive to move and basically send back as many people as possible, and they're using COVID as a kind of as an excuse to use that policy.
And if I could add something here, the justification that they're using is public health laws. So they're enforcing immigration policies under the guise of public health laws, which it obviously makes sense that COVID is a public health issue. There are public health concerns for sure. But the speeding up of some of these processes that Mauricio is talking about are done under the guise of public health law. And I know a lot of the attorneys that I work with are very concerned that we're going to kind of continue this emergency public health regulation to enforce really draconian immigration policy right now.
Yes, absolutely. So that's exactly what they're saying. So they're treating it as a health crisis for immigration purposes now to make sure they speed up either the processes or even just denying. There's been a lot of reports of people that even attempting just to ask for asylum and just absolutely denied, not even have the opportunity to even try. This is also part of the MPP, the Migrant Protection Program, as they call it, but really it's just the Stay in Mexico program. A lot of the people that have been trying to legally ask for asylum are stuck. They can't come in. They don't want to go back. COVID is rampant in that area. And as Phil mentioned, the public health laws have been used to either completely stop the legal asylum seekers, and as well as anybody that make it through, to kind of speed up their process and send them back and deport them as quickly as they can. So that's just kind of a brief update on COVID and what we have seen, especially right now. And this is something that is ongoing every single day. We struggle. I personally struggle every single day with the courts trying to get everything done, simply because it's very rare for people tonight actually to appear in person. So I know the government does not appear in person in any court hearings anymore. So at least in San Antonio and in Pearsall, that's kind of what the rule has been since, I want to say probably since April. Probably since April is when we started seeing that the attorneys for the government no longer show up to the hearing, so they do everything telephonically or virtually. So that really is very difficult because it's delaying a lot of the cases in detention. And in non-detained, cases have been stopped. There have not been any really non-detained cases, and they're supposed to start again in August. I think either 16, 17, or 19, but they've been saying that since June. We're gonna restart cases in June, and then they push it back to late June, and then they push it back to July, push it back to late July, and now we're in mid August now. So that's hundreds of thousands of cases that have been getting pushed back. And keep in mind, a lot of these cases are people that have been waiting already for maybe years to hear their immigration case, either get a benefit or fight the case, and they just keep getting delayed. So a lot of the information that they have, they might be forgetting things. A lot of the documents might be getting old, and it's just, it has really wreaked havoc. COVID has really wreaked havoc in the immigration system. We already had a very, very large over 1 million cases backlog before COVID. Right now, I'm scared to even try to think how backlog we're going to be just in the next 6 months to deal with that. But so that's COVID for now.
Thank you for that. And I have a few questions in the chat, but I also
Sure.
wanted to add the fact that you brought up that it's public health, but the true solution would be to release everybody from detention centers so they can stay with their sponsors. So it's kind of BS to call it public health. But one of the questions, so the first question is, are the cases in these detention centers being counted in the overall cases reported in the US?
For COVID County, my understanding is that they are. They are tracked nationally, and they are tracked. I'm not sure they're just separated, because they do have a tracking for just regular cases, and then they have tracking for detained populations, that's in jails, prisons, and detention centers. But they are being tallied up for national purposes.
And the second question we have is, somebody had a question about the news that people were being sprayed with disinfectant. They said they'd heard that dorm spaces were being sprayed and it was causing breathing and eye problems. And she was wondering, is that the case, or is it just in is there truth to that news that people are being sprayed with disinfectants that are causing skin problems, breathing problems, things like that in detention?
I can't personally say from any of my clients that they have experienced that, or at least none of them have actually voiced that to me. As I mentioned before, it was proven that the GEO facilities and detention facilities in California were using a chemical that was causing bleeding through the hands and nosebleeds for the detainees that were using those cleaning materials. But as spraying down and causing of that, I personally have not run across any of my clients that have told me that. I don't know about you, Phil, but I have not.
No, I haven't either. Although it doesn't surprise me when you think about cleaning a facility like the dorms in Pearsall. These are basically like a big garage or something, is the right way to think about it. So it's a big room with 50 beds in it, and to think that they're doing industrial style cleaning there with really amateur cleaners, and that having negative health effects by people who are sleeping on a bed that just got bleached. Yeah, it certainly doesn't surprise me. But I haven't met anyone who has gotten sprayed down during the cleaning process.
Yeah.
Gotcha. And then just one last, to the person who asked about donating masks, I'm going to do a follow-up email with ways you can support and get involved. So, but really our goal, instead of donating supplies, is to get people released from detention. But I'll definitely follow up with you on that question. And then the last question, they had a question about, they asked any more information on those who had been held in hotels. Yeah, and that was.
So I think they're referring to when they're I'm not sure they're referring to this, but I know they were holding children in hotels while they were doing the whole COVID and the family separation thing. I think this was specifically happening. I believe it was McAllen or Harlingen. It was in South Texas that they were using this procedure of putting I believe it was children in hotels. I am unsure exactly what has been going on with that. From my understanding, I believe they're still being held, but I could be wrong. So I'm not 100% sure on that. And I don't know if you have heard about that, Phil, or if you have any more info on that.
No, I've seen some of the headlines about it, but I haven't looked into it that deeply. I think you're probably right. I believe those are probably people who it's a separated family proceeding. So the person who traveled with their child is getting prosecuted for the federal crime of entering illegally, and while they're doing that, their child is being held in a hotel, which is obviously preferable to the kids in cages situation we saw years ago. But any family separation is going to be such a traumatic experience for everyone involved. That's obviously what we're denouncing. But that's speculative. I haven't actually engaged with that story much.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, so if we want to go to the next topic.
Okay, I think the next topic to talk about is DACA. And I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Phil Davies. I'm another staff attorney. Mauricio handles almost exclusively people who are in removal proceedings in detention centers. So that's why he's really the expert on that. I deal with people in more of an affirmative setting, so helping people get green cards, helping people renew their DACA, petition for their spouses, that type of thing, as well as some removal cases as well. DACA is super complicated, and anyone that was around for the first presentation will remember just the different levels of legalese that go into explaining exactly what DACA is. But it's basically a deferred action program. So meaning that the US government, in particular the Department of Homeland Security under the Obama administration, carved out a group of people that said, these people are such a low priority that we are not going to try to deport them even though they are deportable. So this wasn't the legislative branch of government, this was the executive branch of government. There's been a lot of infighting about whether that was constitutional or not, and it's been up and down to the Supreme Court a few different times. During the Trump administration under Jeff Sessions, who was one of the attorney generals of this administration, there's really been a rotating cast of people in those top positions. But he attempted to phase out DACA. And the case that just recently went to the Supreme Court said that the way that they tried to phase out DACA was illegal. So they did not allow them to end the DACA program in the way that they wanted to do so. That was a huge victory for us. It was really unexpected, to be honest. And I think those of you that attended the first training will remember how pessimistic I was about our chances of actually getting that victory. But it was a huge victory for racism, for the immigrant rights community. The victory has been a little bit soured in the last few days. On Wednesday, Secretary Wolf, who's the acting Department of Homeland Security Secretary, issued a memo on DHS's interpretation of DACA. And what basically that said was, DHS has reviewed the Supreme Court's decision. We recognize that we cannot phase out DACA in the way that we had originally proposed to, but we still have the authority to do that. So we're going to try again, basically. For now, the existing regulations that they've put into place will not allow people to apply for DACA for the first time. So anyone that is eligible for DACA who's trying to make an initial application, they will not accept that. Which that's a huge deal. There are thousands of people who are in the typical dreamer motif of being brought to the United States when they were young, not knowing any other country as their homeland, being eligible for the DACA program, but are unfortunately not allowed to apply for DACA at this time. Mauricio, I see that we have, can y'all comment about the reports on missing children, and are we facing any of these situations? Um, I, so I think that Mauricio alluded to it earlier. There's just so much bureaucratic inefficiency right now that people get lost in the cracks. I don't have any clients that are in that situation, but I've seen on our group Slack channel, like our work software, that the attorneys in Houston are dealing with that situation, where it's people that are it's an immigration bureaucracy that's inefficient at its best during the time of COVID, working with people who don't speak the language. So you would have a family separation that was supposed to be for a day, but then someone gets misplaced in the system, and it ends up being a week process. I know that's what some of our colleagues are going through in Houston. I don't know if you've seen anything like that in your work, Mauricio.
Yeah, so just with that as well, I'm aware of that we're dealing with that, just kind of that breakdown in communication from all parties. So even OR, the ones that are dealing with the children, and Department of Homeland Security with the parents, and even the parents with the children and the shelters. Everybody's kind of overwhelmed with what's going on right now. Yeah. So it's been very slow. Answers, if you call, you send a request for information or something, it could take days, weeks, and during this time, a lot of the families are separated. So a father and a mother will not know where their children are, or the children will know, where the parents are. So it's a very stressful situation. Specifically for missing children's report, I am not aware personally, or I haven't seen that. But I know for sure that there's been a lot of breakdown in the bureaucracy and the line of just kind of how it works, that the processes and everything has been very delayed. And I know that there has been a very slow information back and forth between the families that are separated. Even the sponsors for the U.S., we have seen that there have been a lot of times they don't exactly know what's going on, what is happening, or where the family members are.
Let's see what else we have here. So if DHS has said they won't accept any new DACA applications, can you explain why your office has advised clients to file them now? Is there a window to apply before this goes into effect? So I think a lot of the communication that's out there right now is, it's 1 day old, but it's already very old in terms of its effectiveness, because as soon as the Supreme Court made their decision on DACA, we got another court in Maryland to say that new applications must be accepted at this point. And so Raíces made a big push to say, if we can do new applications for DACA, let's do it. Let's do as many as we possibly can. So a lot of our communication has gone out about that. This memo from DHS Secretary Wolf that I talked about on Wednesday has really kind of dampened the fire about that. They said that they'll be just rejecting DACA applications outright right now for initial DACA applications. As far as the individual consults that I've had with people, one thing that I'm telling people to do is, if there's no other option, like if we don't have any other type of immigration relief, we can go ahead and make a DACA application right now in hopes that they will be a part of a class action settlement later. So we're sort of playing the long game with it. It's obviously not an ideal situation for most people that are looking for relief from DACA, but the hope would be that we would get another judge in a different federal court to rescind the DHS memo on what initial DACA applications can be accepted or not, and allow everyone that's made applications in the meantime, those applications to go through. So like I said, Raíces is still kind of trying to figure out exactly what our position is on this. We're talking to other immigrant rights organizations about what they're doing, kind of how we're going to go about attacking this in federal court to see if we can open things up for initial DACA. But for right now, we're less gung-ho on calling out for initial DACA applicants.
Yeah, I mean, renewals, absolutely. Anybody that has let it lapse or is about to expire, absolutely do not let it expire. If any of you guys know anybody that's in that situation, absolutely encourage them to go ahead and renew now, because we have the opportunity right now to at least extend for another year until well, originally two, now one, once the memo was actually implemented and full force by DHS. But absolutely encourage everybody that you know to go ahead and renew, because it's just one more year of protection while everything gets litigated as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for jumping in, by the way. So somebody else had a question regarding the children staying in hotels, but that's something I can follow up with if you want. They asked if, like, who's caring for them and if their guardians who brought them are detained elsewhere. And along with that, we are going to talk about family separation a little later on, but somebody asked, what is the reasoning behind separating families? So maybe we can answer that and when we go over that. Let's see if there's, okay, and then somebody asked, in addition to DACE folks here in San Antonio, are there TPS migrants as well in significant numbers?
Yeah, TPS, for people that aren't aware, is temporary protected status. So this was some kind of leftover policy regarding people in various Central American countries who'd been affected by large natural disasters, who came into the United States in the early 90s, I think. I don't know, Mauricio, correct me if I'm wrong.
Early 90s.
And they have lived in a sort of similar to DACA kind of quasi-immigration status for years. TPS is being phased out in the same way that DACA is. It's not the same numbers as DACA. I mean, DACA, we're talking, hundreds of thousands of people. TPS, because it's an older policy, because there was a very specific window and specific situation to apply with that, it's not as big a deal, and it's not as big a deal in San Antonio. I know when I lived in DC and some places where TPS holders were resettled in big numbers, that is a really big deal, but San Antonio less so.
Yes.
And I think that was related to that. The other two, I guess the other one had to do with children staying in hotels. I think this answer is probably consistent with what happens in detention as well. They wanted to know who is caring for the children if they're separated from their guardians.
Yes, so, okay, so I'm going to talk normally, because we're jumping into family separation now, so this just kind of ties in nicely. So normally the process that was followed was they will be sent to a shelter. Some of you may know the BCFS in San Antonio. That was one of the big shelters that were accepting migrant children, and from then that agency would look for foster care, either people while they continue with the process or while they found the sponsor or family members in the U.S. That's kind of how it used to be. And now with the hotel, it's a little different in the separation that is now. The people that are usually taking care of the children are hired staff. So either they are working directly with some sort of agency, because the government really likes to contract a lot of the work. So more than likely,
they're usually social workers, though. I think is important to note.
Yes. So it will be some sort of social working agency, or at least someone that is licensed to take care of the children in that sense. But that's as far as I know on that sense for the children. That's as far as I know. I'm not sure if we'll get any more, but usually I know most of the times it's going to be contracted work to another different agency that's going to actually take care of the children, provide them either with a safe place to be while the immigration process continues, so the sponsors are found and released to the family members.
Yeah. You want to just jump into family separation more generally, Mauricio, and kind of what we're seeing in the
Yes.
Family separation 2.0.
2.0, yeah. So I mean, it was banned, right? So it was litigated and it was ended and everything was supposed to be phased out, but the reality of was it actually never stopped. It just kind of became more clandestine, kind of under the radar, more sneaky per se. It wasn't such a large number. The outcry wasn't as hard because things were different. Things changed a little bit, but family separation continued since 2018, since supposedly ended to today. Right now, again, as we mentioned before, with this health crisis excuse, what they're doing is so there's a few things, right? So either the family comes in, they pick him up inside of the United States. So now they have to see what they're going to do with this family. So the way the separation happens is because the parents, the guardians, the people that the children are coming with are going to be prosecuted in federal court for the crime of illegal entry into the United States. So because this person is going to be in a criminal facility, an actual jail, rather than an immigration detention center, you cannot have minors there, right? It makes sense. You don't want children to be exposed to that environment. So they're separated, and they're supposed to be sent to a safe place for the children to await their own immigration case, because everybody has their own immigration case. Even if you're a family unit, you can later on combine into one, consolidate into one case. But generally speaking, everybody has their own case, which is very scary, because what we have been seeing now lately is that actually children are being deported by themselves. So we've seen that the cases for the children just go on while the parents are still either in detention or in federal prison awaiting the trial for their federal crime of illegal entry or re-entry, as the case may be. And we have seen that's been happening. We have seen that children, a lot of the children, not a lot of the children, but there's been a significant number of children in Texas that have signed away everything for deportation and they get sent. And sometimes these are children that are either 10 years old or sometimes even younger. So there's like a lot of children that don't really understand what is going on. And the sad part, and that is the frustrating part, and this is what we're trying to do to help as an organization, is we're trying to provide that representation for everybody. Of course, we can't. There's just the number is too big, and we're very stretched out, very thin. We don't have the resources and the attorneys to provide help for everybody, but we are trying, and we appreciate the help that of the community, that everybody's supporting us. But the children don't really understand what is going on with this. And this is a tactic that we have seen that the government use, something that was used very significantly, especially at the beginning of the implementation of zero tolerance policy, and still today, is that perverse incentive of, if you sign away your asylum rights, if you sign for deportation right now and you agree to give up everything, the government will guarantee that we will provide you with your child and you will be deported together. But if you don't do that, who knows what could happen to your kid. That was really at the peak of 2018, when everything started kind of falling down on that policy, because there were so many cases of children, of parents that had to decide, and there were thousands of parents, hundreds of parents that did that I knew personally. I was representing two of them. That this particular case, I was a woman, and she had a toddler. It was a 2-year-old, and the government told her, like, you either give up your right for asylum, and I guarantee you that I will return your child to you so you guys can go back to your country, or you can fight, and who knows when you see your kid, or when you speak to your baby again. And they did that a lot. Family separation right now is still happening. That's when you see the reports of children in hotels, and that sort of event. That's where it's coming from. So it's family units that have either been already crossed to the United States, and they were apprehended by Border Patrol or in some sort of arrest of police, and they were separated. The rule was, or it was what it was supposed to be, is you were not supposed to separate family units unless the guardian or the adult they were with was suspected of a serious crime, or it was a danger to the child for these people to be together. But what we've seen is that they're just kind of ignoring that, and just kind of still separating anyways. And they're still prosecuting the guardians and the parents. So the numbers are not as big, as they were at the height of 2018. That's due to a few reasons. Now, basically, a hard border shutdown has stemmed the numbers down of asylum seekers, because a lot of the time they're just being turned away. They don't even have the right to really come in and try to apply for asylum as they used to before. And the number that are actually coming into the United States have also been lower in number, just because of the situation of COVID and financial situation in Mexico and northern Mexico, and the problems that they're having there. The plan that we have for stopping this, we have been in the fight since it began, representing children, representing parents, making sure document everything that we can, and speaking with other national immigration and civil rights organizations to make sure we have a correct number of a correct accounting of what's happening. So we actually want to have documented cases so we can prove that to the courts and bring that up in litigation. As I mentioned before, there was litigation in 2018 that ultimately came to the end of family separation. So everything was coming up to end that. So on paper, family separation is supposed to be over, but in reality, there's a lot of gray area, especially now as well. Again, as Phil mentioned, that public health analysis that they use is very skewed when it comes to applying the rules with the, immigrants coming into the United States. So they use that as an excuse as well to make sure to keep that out, to keep the family separated. I don't want to speculate on the motive, but it seems to be sort of done in a sort of a punitive way to make sure and ensure and deter migration to the United States. So that is something that we have seen. I don't know if you have any more insight or anything to add, Phil, to that.
Not necessarily. I think that one of the nuanced issues of the last point that you were making, Mauricio, is like, you know, there is this incentive to deter people from making the journey into the United States with their whole familial unit. And I know that one of the named concerns from the government is that they're worried about fake families, or they're worried about people who would otherwise not try to seek asylum, who don't have a legitimate asylum case, who are just economic migrants, bringing their children with them and creating this unsafe environment. So there is this policy of deterrence that's trying to be pushed here, but the results on the ground is obviously traumatizing and brutal. It looks like we have some questions in here, Mauricio, about the.
I also have a question, actually.
Yes.
Did you guys mention the kind of how DHS is disregarding the ruling on the Flores settlement?
Okay, so I can explain a little bit of that. So the Flores settlement was a settlement created specifically for the protection of children in detention facilities, or detention and immigration proceedings in general. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, I don't remember exactly the day, but I believe it was 23 days or 22 days. That is the limit that you yeah, so that a child cannot actually be detained for immigration purposes over that time frame, and that is done because there's numerous studies and proven that detention, separation, of families and children negatively affects them psychologically, also throughout their entire life. It's something that a lot of people will carry with them. DHS right now is basically just not even. How to put this nice? They're not even looking at it. Like, honestly, it sounds they don't care. Literally put, they are just kind of turning their head around a little bit and closing their eyes, like, oh, I didn't realize that was still a thing, kind of a thing. So there's been a lot of people and a lot of children that are still detained, and there is actually concerns about the way that the Flores settlement has been continuously violated, and it continued to do so. And it seems to be that it's actually like DHS policy to violate this agreement to protect children. We have seen it, we are seeing it, and I'm not sure if you want to add anything to that, Phil.
Yeah, maybe just a little bit more nuance on that too, where it's the thing that's trying to. So when someone is trying to get out of detention under the Flores settlement because a child can't be in detention for more than 3 weeks, what is happening is the family is trying to get out of detention because it's a mother and child, or a father and child, or a whole familial unit that's trying to get out of detention under Flores, and DHS is saying not so fast. It's only the child. So you get this really Hobbesian choice where it's like, okay, well, your child can be released from detention under the Flores settlement, but you guys have to stay here. And so what we're saying is that's when you have given someone a choice like that, you've given them no choice at all. And so a whole familial unit should be released under the Flores settlement, so that the trauma that's sought to be avoided as per the Flores litigation is avoided, as opposed to this false choice that's being given.
Yeah, Thank you, guys. So Rowana asks, are the solutions to the problems we are talking about today based on the results of the November elections?
Yup. The I mean, so many of the things that we're talking about are going to be the November elections are going to be hugely influential on immigration policy. As far as DACA goes, that's exclusively in the hands of the executive branch, so that could be rescinded as early as a different president takes office, if that were to happen. Also, a Congress that was willing to pass a DREAM Act or other types of immigration reform, that'll also be largely determined about what happens in the November elections. But immigration policy generally, so much of what we're talking about right now happens through the Department of Homeland Security, through the Department of Justice, through Customs and Border Patrol. So these are all executive agencies. So literally who the president is determines which ways these laws get enforced. And if they're going to be continued to have a hardline enforcement, zero tolerance, no legal immigration as well as illegal immigration seems to be the motto right now.
And just,
the November election will be hugely consequential on that.
Absolutely, yeah. So vote whoever can.
The next question is, can we push for a family unit policy?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the issue and the whole fight has been mostly since the beginning of family separation, to make sure to keep that family unit together. But as Phil mentioned, they kind of done that. So like, okay, we keep you all together, but when Flores kicks in, the family separation still happens because they have that option of releasing the child to a sponsor or staying with a family unit. It's still in detention. I don't really have much more info on that, just that I know that that was the whole point of fighting family separation, was to keep the familial units, and to a sense they kind of are, but not really. So it really depends on the situation of each person that's been detained, and the Department of Homeland Security is really the ones that make those determinations. So it really is who that officer or agent was at the time that initiated the separation or the keeping together of the familial unit. It really is up to the person on the ground to start moving that or bringing them back together. So it's very difficult because we're talking about hundreds of different people that are working on the ground making these determinations. And the concern is that a lot of the time, either they don't have the proper training or education to be making these really life-altering choices for the families and the children, and they just kind of either doing a quota kind of a thing of like certain number of people have to go there, because remember, the government loves to contract stuff. So the detention facilities are run by contractors on a government contract, and they have a bed quota. I believe Pearsall is, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, but I believe it's 75 or 65%. That must be full. So they must have, the government assured the detention facilities that they will have 65% or 75%. I can't remember exactly. It's either one of those two, but they will have those number of beds used so they can continue their contract and getting paid. So that also creates the incentive for the government to keep detaining people and separating family units to make sure that those quotas are met with the shelters and are met with the detention facilities. So it's a very convoluted web of various interests that are tugging here, and none of them are tugging towards the rights of the children.
You kind of already answered this, but I think so they're asking, what is the oversight of the children? Who is in charge of accounting for all the children? I assume it's if and when they're separated from their guardians.
Yeah, it would be Health and Human Services, I believe, has a particular program within the immigration bureaucracy where they have licensed professionals that are charged with looking after children who are making their way through the immigration system if they're not with their family. So it's HHS would be the short answer to that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Although they have also lost children or lost account of children and haven't been able to reunite them with their families, so there's not a lot of accountability there either.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of things. Just to jump on that real quickly, like I remember specifically because I had to deal with this which was just outstanding during the height of zero tolerance. Like I remember we had to push for DNA testing to find the children from the parents because they just didn't know. Like they couldn't prove that they were related or not because either the documents were all lost or they just didn't have them to begin with. So they didn't really know who to release kids to, who to reunite. So they were actually swabbing kids and parents to prove that they were actually father and child or mother and child to actually reunite them or for either deportation or release to a sponsor. So that's just our system.
And then next question is clarification for who is making the decisions for unaccompanied minors, since minors cannot enter any contract otherwise null. I don't know
so yeah, so that's a good question because it's like obviously your 12-year-old can't sign a contract to buy a house or something, so how could they be making a decision so consequential as this? The short answer to that question is the immigration judges. So the minor that's going through the immigration court proceedings will be in regular contact with the immigration judge, who will ultimately make the determination on that case. So they're theoretically being looked after by somebody from Health and Human Services, and their case is being adjudicated by an immigration judge who makes a determination on whether or not they're going to be allowed to stay in the country.
The next one is, how does someone become the sponsor of a child?
Well, that depends. So we're talking about family separation. Usually it's family. So if your family members, your extended family is coming to the United States and you have legal status in the United States, or even sometimes, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, even people that did not actually have legal status were allowed to have children released to them after during 2018.
That's true.
So basically is that approval from family from the parents, the guardians, you yourself acting to be a sponsor. The other way to sponsor a child, well, it's not really sponsoring, but to look after them for a while, is being in contact with some of those agencies like BCFS in San Antonio. I know is one that you can foster children that were sent from the shelter to them for a few, it could be a few weeks to a few months until they're able to be released to their families ultimately.
Awesome. And can I say something really quick about that? We get a lot of questions about that in the volunteer email about people wanting to sponsor, but our goal is to keep families together, so because parents are the best guardians and best people for their children to be with. So that's something that we really want to keep in the forefront of our minds as well. And yeah, okay, cool. I think those are the questions for other than what is the name of the agency? Oh, it's what is the BCFS? Is that?
Yeah, BCFS. Yeah, S, not C. I'm sorry. BCFS. There you go.
Awesome. Okay.
There are many others. But that's just the one that I know in San Antonio. That's local. That does that.
Cool. Excellent. Thank you, guys. I think the last topic was, or you might have already covered it, but I'm just gonna let you guys keep going.
All right, yeah, let's roll on, and we can get back to some questions in a bit. Because I think we wanted to at least cover what's happening with MPP and asylum. And Mauricio, feel free to jump in here. So MPP, as people will remember, is the Migrant Protection Protocol, which is an extremely ironic name for the Remain in Mexico policy. So this is for Central Americans, people from El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, that are making their way to the United States to seek asylum. They will not be allowed in the United States, either to be in immigration detention or bonded out and released to a sponsor. They will have to remain in Mexico in refugee camps, and then as the immigration court opens up and is allowing hearings to go on, there'll be buses that take people from the refugee camps that they are basically staying in places like Juarez and Nuevo Laredo, take them into San Antonio or El Paso or San Diego for their hearing, and then take them back. So, I mean, this is obviously problematic for a number of different reasons. The most concerning thing to me is that northern Mexico is like the most dangerous place in the world. I mean, the Mexican state of Tamaulipas is on the same Department of State watch list as Syria and Afghanistan in terms of danger. So it's like for us to be setting up these shanty towns, people who are seeking protection, and having them remain in these places is crazy dangerous to me. It's also the access to counsel for people who are in this situation is just not there. I mean, Mauricio and I both live in San Antonio, and we go to Pearsall all the time, but we just don't have the boots on the ground in places like Nuevo to handle this type of stuff. And Raíces has hired attorneys in these places, and we're building out our team to try to accommodate. But I saw statistics that less than 5% of people that are in MPP proceedings are going through with a lawyer. So the just abusive process that's happening with the migrant protection protocol is insane. And then not to mention that everything has been shut down for the last couple months with COVID. So there's this issue of, people who've made this incredibly perilous journey across Mexico to seek asylum in the United States are being told to remain in Mexico in some of the most dangerous places in the world while they're being bussed in to do a asylum proceeding that could take weeks, months, years, and they have to remain there for the entirety of that proceeding. And then on top of all that, the proceedings have stopped. So we've had people that have theoretically had a court date pending for 6 or 7 months that are just waiting in Nuevo, trying to make their way into the lawful asylum system, and they're not being allowed to. So that's a huge issue. That's a kind of a game changer in what asylum is going to look like in the future, and how long that policy is going to be allowed to continue. There's obviously a lot of federal litigation about that. Raíces is a partner organization in suing the government to try to open that policy back up so that people can come in and either wait out their case in immigration detention or be released to a sponsor and go through the immigration court system here in the U.S. And then even the people that do make it through the asylum system, and Mauricio can speak to this, asylum has been so eroded under the Trump administration. Because asylum, like we talked about in the original presentation, is for people who are being persecuted on account of their race, religion, or membership in a particular social group, basically. And we have defined particular social group so narrowly under the Trump administration, and every new rule, every new regulation has cut it down further and further and further, so that things like gender violence, things like gang violence, the things that are really plaguing these Central American nations that are sending their asylum seekers, that are sending their refugees, we're hardly considering any of that to be grounds for asylum at this point. So there's proposed regulations about what the new rules will be for asylum they're proposed in June. They go through a notice and comment period. Raíces submitted a bunch of comments. We had a call to action to submit comments, and then we'll see what DHS actually ends up doing with the implementation of these rules. But if from my perspective, what we're currently seeing right now in regards to the asylum regulations is the end of asylum in the United States. There's such a small group of people who'd ever be eligible to fit into this category.
Yeah, absolutely. Every month, there's always something new, some new narrowly decided case, or what we've seen is that a new interpretation of past decisions that kind of change it on its head a little bit and just makes it that much more difficult to actually fight for what it was written and was given to the migrant that needed the help. It was written the law that way, but this administration has consistently, since the very beginning, attacked this whole process and the procedure and the law behind it. There was a little while, luckily this changed, but we had this ban on asylum if you went through a third country. They call it the safe third country rule. That was that if you crossed another country before coming to the United States and you did not apply for asylum there, then you were barred from applying for asylum in the United States. And this was active for a few months, which this rule was specifically created to basically deny all asylum claims from Central America. Like, this was the purpose for that. It was to discourage migration, to discourage people applying for asylum, and to make sure that it would be speedy, because now they will get to the judge and the government attorney will be like, oh, did you pass through Mexico? Yes. Did you ask for asylum in Mexico? No. Your Honor, he doesn't qualify for asylum. You're right, you don't qualify for asylum. Thank you very much. Goodbye. So that was kind of what they were trying to do, and a lot of people got deported on that. Luckily, that's actually been stricken down now. So thankfully, there's that ludicrous rule that came out of nowhere with absolutely no basis on anywhere is finally gone. So now people from Central America is actually able to apply for asylum again. But as Phil mentioned, this is a ghost of what it once was, and it was sort of like, it was already difficult to win asylum in the best of situations, even with administration support of just neutral application of laws as they're supposed to. It's already a hard bar. Asylum is not something that is easily won by everybody. This is not something that, I feel like there's maybe a misconception on the media or how it's been presented, that it kind of makes it seem like, oh, you apply for asylum in the United States, you win, you get granted automatically. And that is absolutely not the case. Even in the best of situations, there is a lot of thought, it's a lot of argument, it's a lot of evidence, and there's a lot of testimony that has to be taken. And it's a hard process. It's a hard case. And it was hard to win before because the rules are very specific and very limiting already. And now with this new administration changing the rules and just basically making it impossible, it's almost basically useless to even try to petition for asylum at some point for a lot of people, because it's been tailored to reject, deny, and return as many people as possible now, unfortunately.
Next question related to that is, do you feel that the MPP program will be done away with if a new administration takes office in January 2021?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I know that that is one of the programs that's on Joe Biden's listed immigration reform things on his website. So I'm hopeful that that will be an issue that's addressed immediately coming into 2021, and I'm hopeful that we have a president who takes the United States humanitarian obligation seriously. I think that's really one of the fundamental reasons that we see the Trump administration's policies being the way that they are, is they don't feel any responsibility for the humanitarian aspect of what we're seeing at the southern border. And I know we had a question somewhere back in the weeds about the ironies and the double standards of all this, is that so much of the havoc and danger in Central America is U.S. created, not only because of our consumption of drugs and because of our military involvement in Latin America, but also because we've deported gangs back to Latin America. Some of the biggest criminal organizations, transnational criminal organizations in the world that are running in Honduras and El Salvador right now have roots in the United States straight from our deportation machine. So it really is this circle of misery, to circle back to that ironies and double standards question.
And
Absolutely.
Along with that, I think, isn't the U.S., according to Canada, now no longer a safe country to seek asylum in? Didn't they just rule that?
So Canada actually, they found that the U.S. asylum process is unconstitutional under their asylum law. So they're saying that it is not safe to send asylum seekers to the United States anymore. So Canada is basically saying the U.S. it's not a safe place. It's not a good place to be sending asylum seekers, which is, I just find that shocking that I don't find it shocking that it happened. I just find it shocking that not a lot more people are thinking about that.
So
let's see.
Sorry. Go ahead. Do you guys? Okay. So this question says, Mauricio or Phil, I have an opportunity to ask a question of Joe Biden through an organization I belong to. What issue should I ask about?
Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting with Joe Biden's current posturing for immigration. There's so much going on in the world right now that, I think to Mauricio, Spencer, and I, and probably to many of you, immigration is one of the main issues that we care about. And our world seems on fire, but there's so many other things that have been grabbing the national spotlight that for Joe Biden to mention anything about immigration would honestly make me happy, would give me some hope that he's taking these issues seriously. I think pressing him on the status of DACA and what we're going to do about getting a DREAM Act that actually works for the thousands of people who are stuck in legal limbo in the United States, I think that's a perfect question to ask. But I don't know what your thoughts are, Mauricio.
Yeah, absolutely. I think DACA is one of the most pressing issues that definitely need to be spoken to, and at least be given a clear guidance of what the goal is, or at least if he doesn't have a plan of implementation, or at least what the end goal is. Like we definitely would benefit of knowing exactly what he feels, what he thinks about that, and what he hopes to accomplish. I think that would be very very welcome in our community, and the fact that we're having to know that there's someone at the very, very top that is thinking towards this and trying to guide us to a better place in regards to that.
And that's one of the things about immigration law that's so tricky is you're dealing with a population that many times can't vote by the very nature of the population. So their political capital is inherently limited. So it's whenever you get an outsider that presses a political candidate on immigration, I think that's so valuable because you aren't able to mobilize support from voters in the same way that you are for other issues. So yeah, I appreciate you asking that question. I appreciate you being concerned about these issues and taking that to him.
Thank you very much.
This person asked if you had observed, and maybe we'll make this the last question, just to be mindful of your all's time, and then I'll field any questions via email and then get answers for anybody who has questions after this. This person asks if you had observed any effects from the SCOTUS. Honestly, I can't pronounce this, so
I don't know if I know that case by name. Do you know that one, Mauricio?
Not 100% sure. Actually,
I can follow up on that.
I'm aware of that. I've heard about it. I've heard the headlines about it, but I actually haven't sat down and actually read through that yet.
Yeah. I would be making something up if I said I knew what that decision was off the top of my head.
I can follow up with some people after, send them an email. Awesome. Do you guys have anything else to add before we end, or anything to follow up on?
No, not necessarily. I mean, just that we appreciate you guys, taking time out of a Thursday afternoon after work to tune in to hear some very depressing news and to hear some rants from us about current immigration policy. It really gives us hope, gives us spirit to see you guys interested in these issues.
Thank you for the support. Especially, we are completely depending on the support and the help that we receive from our communities, and able to do what we can and to do what we do as we have for so long. So we definitely want to thank you guys for being involved and taking a stand and speaking for those that have no way to really be listened to by the government. They really need your help, and we really appreciate the help that you guys are here helping us provide that help and representation for everybody as much as we can.
All right.